Matt Gaetz joins us, who is really the center of attention right now. Matt, thank you for taking the time. Several questions, but first, I just want to give you an opportunity. What is going on? I mean, look, they say the government's going to shut down tomorrow. Matt, is that going to happen?
Well, the House of Representatives has passed bills to fund veterans, to fund our military, the Department of Defense, to fund our state and foreign operations, and to also fund our Department of Homeland Security. The Senate has not passed a single subject bill to fund anything. So we think those are the core functions of government: veterans, military, border, state and foreign ops. We had the agriculture appropriations bill up last night. I voted for it. Unfortunately, we had some Midwesterners who were not comfortable with the degree of cuts to some of the farming subsidies, and so they brought the bill down, and we'll work through those issues. I think that this is the way to govern. There's going to be moments where a single issue becomes a sticky wicket, and I want to plow through it, get it done. I hope the Senate will take up some of our bills. We should conference those bills and then proceed to get the government funded.
So the House has passed it to the Senate, and the Senate is probably not going to do anything. Is that correct? I mean, so, and by the way, by single issue, did you guys pass an entire budget or just a defense appropriation bill? Which single issue did you guys pass?
Yeah, the latter. So we passed a bill for our Department of Defense, for our Department of State and Foreign Ops, for our Department of Homeland Security, and our Department of Veterans Affairs. So those are areas of great focus for a lot of your viewers, for a lot of our fellow Americans. The Senate could take action on those today. Instead, what the Senate wants to do is say, well, we just want to fund everything the way it's always been funded, and then maybe negotiate how much additional Ukraine money to add on top of that. We had a majority of the majority, 117 Republicans last night, for the first time vote against Ukraine money. So now Ukraine money only exists by virtue of the Democrats, and our leadership should not bring it up ever again. That, I think, is the Senate position, and it is the position that really the federal government has had since the mid-90s, just to take one up or down vote on the funding of the entire government. I don't believe that's the responsible way to put downward pressure on inflationary spending. That's why I think this is a better path.
So are there other single-issue bills that you guys are going to pass before tomorrow? I mean, trying to basically, since we're not doing a CR, which I think is a great approach, by the way, you have to probably put together 5 or 6 separate single-issue bills, right, to get to the combined totality. Is that correct? Because otherwise a CR...
Not all 12 bills are the same, right? So, we attempted to pass the agriculture bill. We still have issues to work through on that. If we were to get the agriculture bill passed along with what we've already passed, it's 73% of the discretionary funding for the government. So it is the vast majority of the federal government's function and the spending that Washington approves for our disparate agencies. There would still be work to do. Look, I think there's going to be some real debate around the Department of Justice's bill. I think that one is not first, because we'd rather prioritize our veterans, our troops, our Border Patrol over some of the folks at the FBI who aren't answering our requests for documents without putting up a massive fight and don't produce the witnesses in a timely fashion that we want to interview. So I do think there is a reason to the priority that we have chosen, and I think it is sound.
So, Matt, I want you to try to fill in our audience the best you can of some inside baseball. There were some heated conversations because there's been some vicious and unfair influencer attacks against you. Who are behind these attacks, Matt Gaetz?
I don't know. I saw a bunch of MAGA influencers we know and love post that McCarthy proxies were reaching out to them to ask them to post negative things about me for money. And a lot of those influencers rejected that solicitation and then posted their rejection of it to indicate that they're supportive of the position I've taken to try to get our fiscal house in order. And so we had a meeting of our conference. I simply asked Speaker McCarthy, was it indeed his proxies, or some lawyer sent out a letter that said he didn't have anything to do with it? And I wanted to know which was true, because there was conflicting information, and it was kind of pathetic to watch. I mean, he mumbled and grumbled and looked down at his shoes, and everyone that was in the room could objectively see that when he said that it wasn't him who was behind these things, that didn't come from a place of great veracity.
So Matt, I want to ask you also about this story from Olivia Beavers. I'm sure you've seen it. She's claiming that you're pitching some House Democrats to oust McCarthy from the speakership. What is the truth here?
Yeah, no, I am singularly focused on getting our spending bills across the line. That is where my effort has been. Of course, Democrats have come up to me seeking gossip, wanting to know, oh, what are you thinking about the motion to vacate? And I've told them, right now, I'm focused on these bills. We do have to deal with the fact that Kevin McCarthy has been a failure, that Kevin McCarthy has not fulfilled his promises. He hasn't released the January 6 tapes. We haven't seen the budgeting process that was guaranteed to us back in January. So we'll deal with that. We will have to deal with that. It is not my focus now. I'm worried about people who are going to be doing the job of this government that deserve to get a paycheck. And it's not like if we don't get this resolved tomorrow, people are going to miss paychecks, but we do need to get to work. We need to start working 18-hour days. I mean, we were taking votes all night last night, all the way to midnight, same as the night before. We've done more legislating in the last 72 hours around here than we've done in the last 8 months, and it's because there are some tough House conservatives who are forcing it.
Yeah, and that's inspiring, but also frustrating, Matt. I mean, you guys took the whole month of August off, right? It shouldn't have to be this bum rush, right? I mean,
look, I don't make the calendar. That's Kevin's fault. That is McCarthy's fault. Kevin McCarthy never intended to do this. He never intended to have single subject bills. The only reason we're passing them now is because we're making him pass them. And if Kevin McCarthy was at all serious about this, you're totally right. We wouldn't have passed one before the August break and then sent everybody home as the federal appropriation process hung in the balance.
So these single subject bills, the Senate's not going to do this. Like the Senate, they're a complete waste of time. So basically, are they going to send back a CR back to the House, and then there's going to be an impasse? That's probably what's going to happen, right?
Breaking the muscle memory of the Senate is not going to be easy. I don't present that as something that is whimsical in any way, but we have to break the fever. We have to break the muscle memory that has occurred since the mid-90s to govern by continuing resolution and omnibus bill. And remember what we are continuing. What we are continuing is the post-COVID era funding that grew by 40% during the COVID era. So I just think that, yes, you're right. The Senate is going to be tough. They're going to be recalcitrant. But I think if we had all of our Republicans in the House, if we had the American people saying, look, we know there has to be compromise and divided government. We know that people like Gaetz are going to have to make some common ground with some Senate Democrats to get the government funded. But the way to do that is not to start with the premise that it's all or nothing, that it's all at once. The premise should be individual review. And then you know what? We may actually get more bipartisan agreement when you're looking at these agencies and programs and different spending priorities that may have lost their efficacy years or decades ago.
Yeah, and so there was 117 Republicans who voted against Ukraine funding. There was 20 last time. This is moving very quickly, Matt. We're starting to see consensus build. Can you just talk a little bit about that as far as how you've seen the Overton window shift? I mean, from 20 people voting against Ukraine funding to 117.
I mean, when we started with the group of people that did not want our country involved in the Ukraine war, we could have met in the Capitol elevator and still had room for social distancing. Now we're 117 strong. We are a majority of the majority. And that is because Congress is the lagging indicator. Republican voters believe that we've sent enough money to Ukraine, that now we need to focus on our border, our country, the safety on our streets, the quality of education in our schools. I mean, we are literally spending $3.5 billion to retire debt that Ukraine accrued before the war began. So we're going into debt to pay off Ukraine's debt. That's how crazy some of these programs are, and it's only through this process that we are acquiring that we're able to highlight that and draw people to our side. Like, the only way you go from having 3, 4, 5, 7 votes to having 117 is you have to keep taking votes. You have to keep having the argument, and ultimately you chip away at it.
So I want to just talk real, and you're doing the right thing, single subject. I love it. Joe Biden is not going to sign some of these bills, right? And so, therefore, they might call it a government shutdown. If that happens, Matt, which you're not cheering for, I'm cheering for a shutdown. I can't stand the government. But you're not. You're a lawmaker. You're responsible. I'm an upset patriot.
I am not cheering for a shutdown. That is correct.
I am. I want a shutdown. But that's a separate issue. It's not even a real shutdown. It's a slowdown or a pause. What were to happen if the government were to pause tomorrow evening? I just want to make sure everyone understands. We're not talking about the sky is falling, Chicken Little stuff, Matt.
No, I believe. Oh, excuse me, Charlie. I think I might have lost my my sound. But what I believe is that you really start to feel the highest levels of pain in these shutdowns when people start missing paychecks. And so if we can get the Senate onto these bills, if we can work out a funding strategy before halfway through October, that's a very different thing than if you have a shutdown that's over the weekend, which would barely be felt by anyone, or that might last a couple days during a work week. I don't want people missing paychecks. I don't want people wearing the uniform missing paychecks. And by the way, they wouldn't have to. Charlie Kirk, I'm telling you right now, Schumer can bring up our defense bill anytime he wants. He can pass it, and we can get our troops paid.
So, Matt, what are the marching orders then coming into the weekend? What are the bills that are the most important as we piecemeal our way to try to avoid a shutdown?
Yeah, I think we have to build this government, you know, kind of brick by brick, stone by stone here. And I think we need to start with our veterans and our military and our border. And if we get that rolling, I think it builds momentum to the other areas where we need deep cuts. I mean, we passed a Department of State bill that cuts down to 2014 levels. It gets rid of a bunch of this woke and weaponized activity that occurs at the Department of State. I would love to see that bill become law. And then, of course, you know, we've got a Department of Justice that really has seen a metastasization of their bad politics, really masquerading as criminal justice and law enforcement.
So the next 24 hours are going to be super important. How could this be, let's just say, swampified? How could the cartel try to navigate here? Because this is usually what happens.
That's a great question.
Right? So yeah, please.
Yeah, anything that they can do to liberate themselves from reviewing these agencies independently. The swamp move is always a move that lumps everything together, and that way you're forced to just take one up or down vote on the entire government all at once. That is their play. It's the same exact play they've been running for decades. That's why we're $33 trillion in debt. It's why we have $2.2 trillion annual deficits right staring us in the face, and it's why the rest of the world is starting to de-dollarize, from the BRICS system to the African Union to even some of the Gulf monarchies selling more and more of their energy outside the U.S. dollar. This is not a time to crush the most valued institution in the American economy, the dollar.
Yeah, and I can start to see, though, the rumblings that moderate Republicans might try to go do a deal with Democrats. How do we prevent that from happening? Don Bacon, for example.
Listen, that may happen. And by the way, if that's going to happen, that was always going to be what was going to happen. If at the end of all the performances, you were going to see moderate Republicans join up with their uniparty coalition in the Democrats to advance Joe Biden's priorities, then that exposes to the American people who you are governed by. And I'm doing everything I can to stop the uniparty, to force them to take votes, to force them to budget and work and appropriate as the law requires. And it's going to be a battle, and the battle's on.
Yeah, this is my big fear, is that we have all this great fight, single subject, but tonight it would not be impossible if Don Bacon and some of the moderates just put a clean CR on the floor. I don't even know if it has to go through committee, and then every Democrat votes alongside of it, and it goes to the Senate.
That very well could happen, and my defense against that is somewhat limited on the floor of the House.
Except, but, you know, PR type campaign. That's all we have, right?
I'm not speaking about any one particular member, but if we have members that go do that, we will be seeding the fields of the upcoming primary challenges for people who would join with Democrats to advance Joe Biden's spending priorities. At some point, you've just got to win elections, win primaries, and get better Republicans. And if our Republicans are going to go do a bad, dirty deal with the Democrats, I'm going to do everything in my power as one member to see that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and so just who are the names of some of the moderates that are I know Don Bacon. I've known Don for years, and I'm not happy with how he's been doing things recently. I'm not saying he's a bad person. I just don't like his approach. Who are the other moderates that we should put some pressure on to say, hey, don't go do a deal with Democrats?
Well, look, there are moderates who've been helping. Mike Molinaro of New York is the guy who actually had the idea to get onto this packet of single subject bills that met most of our nation's priorities. So I don't want to cast, you know, any one group as being destructive, but I think that the people in districts that Joe Biden won, I think that people in, you know, blue states with a big Democrat infrastructure in California, New York, are likely feeling the heat more on these matters than other members. I still want to work collaboratively with all of our members, and certainly Mark Molinaro of New York has been an ally to date, trying to get some momentum in the appropriations process.
Matt Gaetz, everybody. Hold the line, Matt. We will be watching very closely and carefully. The regime is trying to take Matt out because he is really holding the line. God bless you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.